This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jill Newbronner, and here are tonight's top stories from East Asia. China reiterates its anti-protectionist stance as the US announces steep tariffs on dozens of trading partners, the new rates taking effect in a week's time. Taiwan says negotiations will continue with Washington for a better rate after the Trump administration set a 20% levy for the island. Beijing expresses a shock at FBI's expansion plans in New Zealand, a move Washington says it aimed at countering China's influence. Japan voices concerns over possible unrest ahead of Myanmar's planned election, even as the Southeast Asian nation announces the formation of a civilian-led government. Also on East Asia Tonight, Taiwan's foreign caregivers in focus as it becomes a super-aged society. A new law taking effect today, making it easier for seniors to hire live-in care. But why has it triggered a debate? China has condemned what it calls protectionism after the US announced new tariffs on exports for dozens of trading partners around the world, including a painful 35% on Canada. President Donald Trump signed several executive orders setting the new rates as the deadline expired. China warned that protectionism harms everyone. Its foreign ministry spokesman reiterated to reporters there is no winner in a trade war. Beijing is looking at the 12th of August deadline to strike a deal, but an extension of this deadline could be possible. The two sides had made preliminary agreements in May and June after a bout of escalating tit-for-tat tariffs that sent stock markets reeling. Taiwan has been slapped with a 20% levy that is down from an earlier 32%. President William Lai says the island has yet to have tariff talks with the US, but he's holding out for a better rate.
20%从一开始就不是台湾谈判的目标。我们希望在后续的谈判当中，争取台湾更有利、更合理的税率。那这一部分，美国政府也表达意愿跟台湾进行谈判。
Japan says it will continue to press the US to cut its auto tariffs after getting what Mr. Trump had called a massive agreement last week. Tokyo had secured a new rate of 15%, down from an earlier 25%.
今般の大統領令によりまして、我が国を含め各国から米国への輸出に課せられる関税は、当初8月1日から課せられるとされていた関税率から大きく低下することとなりました。
South Korea also managing to strike a 15% tariff deal just yesterday, but it's now hit by a 50% tariff on copper exports to the US, and that its trade ministry says will hit exports hard. Well, all these US tariff developments have been reverberating through Asian stock markets, something that Olivia Mazuki has been watching very closely. So how have they reacted, Liv?
Well, Jill, some analysts were actually expecting that markets would largely shrug off the news because it's nothing new, right? Revised tariffs, they were largely expected, but we did see some big swings in a market today. And South Korea's Kospi, the top loser in the region today, plunging by more than 3%, registering one of the worst weekly performance since April. Large losses also seen in Japan and also Taiwan. They're particularly vulnerable given their export dependence and direct exposure to U.S. tariffs and the global supply chain. China and Hong Kong stocks booking their steepest losses for the week. And not only because of tariff-related sentiment, but also factory activity on the mainland, which contracted in July, both in official and private surveys. This suggests a downturn following robust growth in the first half of the year. Now, risk sentiment prompted a weakening in Asian currencies, particularly the Taiwan dollar, which extended heavy losses amid selling pressure. Meanwhile, investors move to safe haven assets such as the Japanese yen and gold. To help us understand the broader implications of this sweeping tariff move by the U.S., we are joined by Mei Yuan, Assistant Professor of Economics at Singapore Management University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. First, would like to know how you would describe the latest state of play for U.S. tariff push. Has it actually transpired the way Trump wants it so far?
The negotiations are still ongoing and a lot of tariffs are not finalized yet. But I think those outcomes have sent a clear message that is, the tariffs for most of U.S. major trading partners will increase. And taking Taiwan, for example, the 20%, although it's not finalized, is not good news for Taiwan. And we should not only look at the level 20%, but also compare with its competing countries. For example, Korea, which only faces 15% tariff. The 5% tariff difference would matter a lot, say choosing between Taiwan's semiconductor versus South Korea's Samsung as semiconductor suppliers to the U.S. market.
So the runway to these tariffs has been long. Many analysts say it's been built into a lot of the economies already. Or do you feel that there's still that backfire that's coming and that hurt to global demand that's going to affect supply chains, by extension, East Asian economies as well?
Yes, that's definitely the case. For example, Singapore is facing a 10% tariff, which compared to other countries is not too much. It's not too high. But if we take a global supply chain perspective, the 25% tariff on India would affect the export decisions to the U.S. market, hence the sourcing decisions from of parts and components, for example, semiconductors produced by Singapore. So the negative impact on international trade will propagate throughout Asia.
Prof, well, China has time. It's still got August 12th to strike a deal with the U.S. But if they don't, what's at stake for the rest of us? Are we looking at more market volatility and inflationary pressure?
For sure. I think, the U.S. and China have many things to talk about, not only negotiating tariffs, but on other issues like fentanyl. So it's possible that there will be another extension. We don't know that for sure, but I think it is possible. And if the current level of tariff is finalized, that will definitely hurt the whole global economy because China is arguably one of the most important player in the international trade. Yeah.
So, Prof. May, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, all receiving different tariff outcomes. I want to get your thoughts on where that leaves maybe smaller economies and the kind of leverage that they may have in future trade negotiations, which I'm sure will be ongoing.
That is hard to tell. On one hand, smaller economies don't have as many bargaining chips as the larger economies, for example, China. But on the other hand, I think Trump's tariffs are mostly targeting its major trading partners like China, South Korea, Japan. So if Trump is busy negotiating with those major economies, maybe the smaller economies can take a breath for now.
Well, Prof. May, the U.S. is hitting around 70 countries all at once. So what message does that send? Are we going to see the U.S. weaponize tariffs as a foreign policy tool going forward?
I think Trump or the U.S. administration is weaponizing tariffs, and the tariffs will probably stay even after the Trump administration. So I think the best we can do for now is probably to get prepared to a world -1. Trump is increasing tariffs on many countries. Maybe other like-minded countries could work together to further liberalize the trade with each other.
In any negotiations, there are costs, but there are opportunities, as more analysts are pointing out. Just to balance the picture, where do you see the opportunities in these tariffs ending up?
I mean, for example, China is actually become more liberalized after the first U.S.-China trade war in 2018 and 2019. The RCEP has already signed. China has shown interest in joining another mega trade agreement, the CPTPP. There's potential for China, Japan, South Korea forming a 3-country trade agreement to further liberalizing the Asian economy. So there are many things other countries could do in spite of the U.S. tariffs.
Well, lots to digest, but thank you so much for your insight. Mei Yuan, Assistant Professor of Economics at Singapore Management University. Well, I have more business news later, but for now, it's back to you, Jill.
We will wait for that. Thank you so much, Liv. Now, we have more on the U.S. reciprocal tariffs that can be found on our website, cna.asia, as well as our mobile app, including this commentary on how U.S. tariffs could come at a cost. China has expressed its shock at a remark made by the FBI chief that the intelligence agency's new office in New Zealand is aimed at countering China's influence.
中方一贯主张，国与国之间的合作不应该针对第三方，打着对抗中国的旗号，谋求小圈子的所谓绝对安全，不利于亚太和世界的和平稳定。有关方面应该多做有助于增进各国互信与合作的事，而不是相反。
FBI Director Kash Patel opened the agency's first standalone office in New Zealand yesterday. The move aligns Wellington with FBI missions in the other Five Eyes intelligence-sharing nations, including Australia, Canada and the UK. Japan has voiced a serious concern that Myanmar's planned elections could provoke what it calls a strong backlash from the people. Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya, in a statement, urged Myanmar authorities to refrain from violence and to release those detained, including former leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Mr. Iwaya added that his country earnestly hopes that Myanmar's military can act sincerely, given that the state of emergency has been lifted. This all comes as Myanmar's military announces the formation of a civilian-led interim government. That's a move officials say is meant to prepare the country for the upcoming elections. But military chief Min Aung Hlaing will be retaining power as acting president. The announcement follows the lifting of a state of emergency in some parts of the country. It's been in place for more than 4 years now, but it later announced it was imposing martial law across 9 regions and states, citing the threat of armed violence and insurgency in the lead-up to the polls. A military rule is set to stay in places in these areas for 90 days. More than 60 townships are affected by the order. CNA's Leong Wai-kit tells us what this latest martial law could mean for voters in affected areas.
It's very likely that the people affected in those areas will not be able to cast their ballots in December and January. And I must say this, I saw that coming. I say this because if you study enough of what the Myanmar army has said or done, it all builds up to this moment. Now, very early on, Army Chief Min Aung Hlaing has already said that countrywide elections may not be possible. A bit later on, the country's elections commission became more specific. Now, there are 330 townships in Myanmar. The affected areas under martial law is more than 60. Now, the election commission had earlier said that 267 out of 330 townships will hold elections. So if you look at yesterday's list, those affected under martial law, that figure works out to be just 267. Now, a bit later on, there was also a meeting held among the Myanmar military to sort of justify low voter turnout. They said that elections can still be considered successful even if there's partial elections participation. Now, ASEAN chair Malaysia has already said last month that the bloc won't accept the polls if it's just partial elections.
Still to come in East Asia tonight, sales of the Switch 2 gaming console turbocharged Nintendo's quarterly earnings. And China hitting pause on new investments into the US amid uncertainties over tariffs. Welcome back, everyone. Just in time for Olivia Mazuku. He's got the refreshed business news for us. And Liv, Nintendo. Now, they're beating out the top and bottom line for June quarter. And that's thanks to, that's what you were going to tell us, because they're actually doing really well. In fact, they're in a boom right now.
That's right. They're really playing, literally playing, a really good business model. So it beats both top and bottom line for the June quarter. The quarterly revenue more than doubled year on year. And it's attributable to Switch 2, which became the world's fastest selling console after its launch in early June. Revenue soared 132% from a year before to $3.8 billion in the June quarter. Net profit grew 19% to around $638 million US dollars. The Kyoto-based gaming company said the Switch 2 smashed industry records by selling 3.5 million units in its first 4 days. By the end of June, sales totaled 5.8 million units. Nintendo maintained its full-year sales forecast of 15 million Switch 2 units. It has also kept its earnings forecast for the fiscal year ending March, saying U.S. tariff measures and other charges in the market environment had no significant impact. But analysts say it may change. Nintendo does not have its own factories. It needs to outsource manufacturing to partner companies with production bases in Vietnam, which will be charged a tariff of 20% starting August the 7th. Although this is less than half the 46% Trump had earlier imposed, it is still likely to weigh on Nintendo's profit margin. Well, shares of Nintendo have surged by nearly 40% so far year to date. Japan says it will keep pressing the U.S. to cut tariffs on cars and auto parts to 15% and work to ensure its automakers remain competitive against their rivals. Top trade negotiators Ryose Akazawa says Tokyo will continue to urge Washington to promptly take measures to implement the recent agreement. The U.S. has announced the import rate for Japan will be lowered to 15% in a week, compared with a threatened 25%. But it remains unclear when the car tariffs will be lowered to 15% from a total of 27.5%, including a pre-existing 2.5% levy. The car duty strikes at the heart of the Japanese economy, as it is the country's largest export to the U.S. Akazawa says Japan wants to ensure its automakers stay competitive. Chinese EV makers have recovered to their pre-tariff market share level in Europe as their strategies to work around the duties start to pay off. Chinese automakers captured 10.6% of the European EV market in June. This is led by BYD, which saw its registrations more than double on year. Companies XPeng and MG also recorded a significant number of registrations. The EU imposed tariffs on Chinese-built electric vehicles in late 2024 to counter what it's viewed as unfair subsidization. To adapt, Chinese companies have built local manufacturing facilities and avoided ultra-low pricing that would have sparked backlash from regulators. SAIC-owned MG pivoted away from pure EVs while ramping up sales of hybrid and combustion models. BYD has kept up the EV push while adding plug-in hybrids to its repertoire. It also plans to launch operations at its Hungary plant in October, while XPeng CEO said last year that the company in the early stages of scouting sites across the EU. Apple iPhone sales blowing past expectations in the June quarter amid a rush to buy before potential price increases from tariffs. Apple saw its largest quarterly revenue growth in almost 4 years, thanks to surprisingly strong sales of the iPhone and a turnaround in China. Overall sales came in at $94 billion, about 10% higher than the same period a year ago. The tech giant also posting sales growth in China, the first in 2 years. Revenue from Greater China gained 4.4% to $15.4 billion in the June quarter. And this follows 7 straight quarters of declining sales in the region, which was once a reliable growth engine for Apple. New Mac computers and our urban phone customers helped fuel that rebound. Now, experts say the iPhone sales offer an example of the unexpected impacts of tariffs on many companies. Apple chief Tim Cook warns that the tariffs could cost $1.1 billion in the current quarter. South Korea exports surged to their highest level ever for a July, driven by a strong semiconductor and solid vehicle sales, as well as apparent front-loading by companies aiming to get ahead of U.S. tariffs. Exports rose around 6% to almost $61 billion in July from a year earlier, beating estimates of 5.1%. Observers believe the export figures might have been helped by front-loading before tariffs on Seoul. Washington will impose a 15% across-the-board tariff rate on imports from South Korea rather than the 25% duty previously threatened by Trump. The new rate still represents an increase from the 10% levy that's been in place in recent months. And 50% duties remain in place on exports like steel and aluminium. The strain tariffs could create is particularly important for South Korea, which relies on exports for 40% of its GDP. Southeast Asian factories have turned the least optimistic since COVID era, even as overall activity showed a slight recovery in July. S&P Global ASEAN Manufacturing PMI shows confidence in future output among purchasing managers across the region tanked to its lowest level since July 2020 during the height of the pandemic. The pessimism comes even as overall output improved in the month of July. Headline factory activity grew for the first time since March at 50.1, indicating a mild expansion. That is a pickup from June, which recorded the worst contraction in nearly 4 years. The PMI data also showed small signs of improvement in export orders from overseas. But analysts further flag erosion of confidence in factory output, with growth rate expected to stay subdued. Southeast Asian economies serve as a barometer for global trade activity and demand, given their high dependence on industrial output and exports, particularly to the U.S. Meanwhile, overall activity in Japan and South Korea contracted for another month. China has reportedly paused approving outbound investments for companies looking to set up or expand operations in the U.S. as Beijing battles to hammer out a trade deal with Washington. The Nikkei says, citing sources, that local governments and the state economic planner have ceased such approval since April, when President Trump imposed a tariff rate of up to 145% on Chinese imports. Companies with outbound investments below $300 million are required to file with their local government and usually are not subject to national approval. But provincial governments also have stopped processing applications. Companies with investments projects valued about $300 million and above are required to file for approval from the NDRC. Several manufacturing projects that were underway in the U.S. have been put on hold. Chinese investors have pulled back from the U.S. in recent years over fraught bilateral relations and increased American scrutiny of Chinese firms. New Chinese investment into the U.S. peaked in 2016, exceeding $45 billion. They dropped to $3.2 billion last year. quite a bit there, but that's all I have. Jill, back to you.
We appreciate every last bit. Thank you so much.
TGIF.
Yes, you too. Coming up on East Asia Tonight, Taiwan becomes a super aged society this year. Our correspondent finds out how families are coping and what the island is doing to care for its elderly. This is East Asia Tonight, and these are the headlines we're following. China warns that protectionism hurts everyone as the U.S. announces new tariffs on dozens of trading partners. Taiwan gets a 20% levy, down from an earlier 32%, but its president says the island's holding out for a better deal. Japan says it's seriously concerned that election plans in Myanmar could provoke a backlash from the people. To Taiwan now. It's becoming a super aged society this year, and in response to its growing elderly population, a revised law took effect today, making it easier for seniors to hire live-in foreign caregivers. Now, under the revised rules, individuals aged 80 and above can now hire live-in foreign caregivers without needing a health evaluation. But the policy change has sparked a debate, with some expressing concern that it could limit access for those most in need. Now, before we dive deeper into the issue, let's hear first from a single father in Taiwan who's caring for both his elderly parents. Let's see what he has to say about the law revision.
要等一下，今天东西比较多，拍谁？我今年49岁啊，我叫张胜顺，然后我有一个儿子，然后我们是单亲，我离婚了。那我爸爸已经将近高龄90，妈妈大概是87岁、88岁这样左右。来，野菜好啊？野菜唱诶，你好过啊？ 大概是10年前，因为爸爸也是渐渐的老了，生病了，然后所以才回来跟哥哥一起经营这家店。因为我们可能就是下午4点多、5点多起来开店，一路忙到大概1点收店，然后整理一下环境跟家里什么的。 然后大概洗完澡就已经大概6、7点，还要叫小孩子起床，帮小孩子用早餐，然后睡觉。中午起来去帮父母亲买个，看他们想吃什么，去帮他买什么这样子。偶尔可能会带他们去门诊啊，什么有的没的。
啊，我这到家，这家。对啊。这家。你拿报纸读一下。哦。要吃父亲节，这礼拜。哦，啊，你也无甲讲。我有甲讲啊。 我叫他摕底卡的。
当然是想啊，当然是说，如果有人来帮忙的话，当然是我们也比较轻松一点呐。啊，可是我也是想，那如果交给他们那种来照顾，一定是比我们更专业，或者是他们会得到更好的生活资源这样子。就可能妈妈前阵子 COVID-19 感染，然后住院，就是也不能下床什么，变成要换尿布什么有没的，然后都在医院了，就变成。 跟哥哥2个要轮，一个早上啊，一个晚上这样子。看你有想要请无啦？
是弄给我吃啦哈，啊帮我洗澡啦，啊我要买什么，带我去买啦，就这样子啊。
讲请我的老，咱的烦恼啥有诶无？我讲咱烦恼就是安尼，啊有当时是咱看无诶，对无？你愈放心，啊就可能若出去外口，我交一寡什么有诶无诶朋友带。
啊，一出去吼，哦，拢去甲歹安尼规定去，带去迄边仔去讲话，拢无咧，没有看那个老人啦。
假如这个领导人做得好呢，我们有一份功德。
我没有想到什么特别说会占用到我的时间，或者是说什么比较麻烦的地方，因为毕竟都是自己的父母亲嘛。
Fascinating. Now, we want to get more on this story. So CNA's Taiwan correspondent Victoria Jen joining us right now. Now, Victoria, we heard stories like that. Talk to us about how the explosion in demand for caregivers is driving the timing of these rule changes.
As you mentioned, Taiwan is now officially a super-age society with nearly 1 in 5 people over 65. So the new policy is about making the system more accessible and humane. But there's one big issue here, and that is labor shortage. Taiwan is not only running low on caregivers, it's also running low on workers across the board. Sectors like manufacturing and construction are all competing for the same limited pool of migrant workers. So even if Taiwan opens the doors wider to caregivers, the challenge is, will enough workers actually come? Now, keep in mind, Taiwan is no longer as competitive as it once was. Wages for caregivers here are relatively low, especially compared to countries like Japan or South Korea. So for many migrant workers, Taiwan just isn't the top choice anymore.
So that's one aspect. There are other areas that make this policy quite controversial as well. But please tell us more.
Yes, the big issue here is supply. Taiwan currently has around 210,000 foreign caregivers, and every year, only about 12,000 to 14,000 new workers come in. Critics warn that with the sudden policy easing, the gap between demand and supply could widen dramatically.
这一次的突然间的开放会造成有53万的健康长辈，他们具备了一个聘雇的资格。那有2个问题产生，第一个是它的供给跟需求之间会一下子失调，因为供给量是不足以因应这么突然间扩充的人。可是这53万新增的这些可聘雇者，他们基本上都是健康的长辈，所以他的相对之下，他做的工作就是一些煮饭、家务比较轻松的工作啊，反而冲击到的是这些已经在聘雇，但他们相对他们的工作比较辛苦的这些外籍移工，可能就会转向去这些比较轻松的健康长辈的家庭工作。
In other words, the policy may unintentionally create a competition for caregivers, one that high-needs families could lose. People caring for loved ones with severe dementia, paralysis, and rare diseases might find it harder to hire or retain help.
And what more can the government do to prevent the shortage from getting even worse?
The Ministry of Labor says it's taking a wait-and-see approach. A 6-month review is planned to assess how the policy is playing out and whether adjustments are needed. In the meantime, officials are exploring several backup plans, but critics say there are still challenges ahead.
我看到政府主要的2个措施，一个措施是他们还是觉得会先以重症优先，就是接下来如果要进来新申请的人，他还是会先看一下你如果是刚刚在讲比较是照顾的是重度的，然后这种卧床的重瘫的，还是会优先。好，那希望保全这些家庭的权利。那第2个就是确实有在谈到怎么样去积极的加强增加外籍移工来台的人数。可是因为这件事情真的不取决于台湾可以决定。因为它受到全世界抢工的因素，还有台湾的薪资足不足以吸引到更多的人愿意来台湾。
The government is pledging more investment in long-term care, like better training, subsidies, and efforts to attract young Taiwanese into the field. But experts say these are long-term fixes and won't ease the immediate strain. Now, the real test is whether the new policy reduces burdens or adds frustrations, especially for families most in need. And with demand for foreign caregivers rising, managing employer and worker relations amid language barriers and cultural gaps is another growing challenge. Jill?
Always, thank you. CNA's Victoria Jin reporting from Taipei. Across East Asia, scorching temperatures in Japan, South Korea and China, with some areas reaching highs of more than 40 degrees Celsius. Japan's weather service says the country is facing life-threatening temperatures. Heat stroke alerts have been issued for 32 prefectures, and weather officials are asking residents to stay cool, hydrated and take frequent breaks during outdoor activities. In South Korea, the weather service says the country hit a high of 23 tropical nights, which is a phenomenon when nighttime temperatures stay above 25 degrees Celsius from 6 p.m. to the morning. This is a record for the month of July since modern weather observations began. China is taking measures to tackle the surge in energy demand as the mercury rises. Temperatures topped to 40 degrees in the southwest city of Chongqing, pushing its heat wave warning to the highest level, a red alert. And just as residents head into the weekend, some of them will be having hotpot underground. Chongqing was China's temporary capital during World War II and has a large number of air raid shelters, an estimated 1,600 of them. And many of them have been combined and converted into a project called Underground City, creating cool spaces for eateries, wine cellars, bookstores and other businesses.
因为火锅也是代表我们重庆的一个特点，地道的美食。然后我们将我们两个，一个历史，一个人文，一个美食，两者结合，而且它们自身所带的属性，一个是凉爽，一个是热，产生的碰撞，它是非常具有浪漫性的。
Chongqing is in southwest China, is known for its intense summer heat due to its location within a basin and surrounding mountains trapping heat. Daily peaks in the city of nearly 32 million have rarely gone higher than 39 degrees in July, but it has seen temperatures go above 40 for a week. Coming up on East Asia tonight, we take you to Asia's largest digital entertainment expo, ChinaJoy. It's not every day you hear someone quitting a day job to become a memoir writer. Well, one Chinese millennial did just that. Ordinary people pay him to pen their life stories, with some spending quite a hefty amount. CNA's Money Mind looks into what it takes to do just that.
Tong Xiaojun makes a comfortable living writing about the lives of people who are neither rich nor famous. His customers, the people whose stories he writes.
简单来说，就是帮中老年人朋友去梳理他的人生经历，然后整理成书。写回忆录本身，它其实是写给自己的，就最重要的读者是自己，它不是写给公众的。
Writing memoirs is not just a desk job. Today, the 36-year-old is traveling over 900 kilometers from his home in Hangzhou to Henan province. He wants to trace the footsteps of the client whose life story he is documenting.
在那个地方呢，有很多他从小时候生活过的地方，我们可以通过这种实际的这种场景，就是类似于老物件这种样式去刺激客户去回忆一些，回忆更具有细节性的一些东西。那再一个呢，就是只有我们自己走到过那个地方，然后去感受那个地方，那么我们在后面的回忆录的撰写过程当中，对那个描写才会更加的具体。
The client is a 46-year-old primary school math teacher. She's taking him back to a key moment in her life when she was 10 years old.
当时就是爸爸妈妈去哪？就是
去广东。
去广东。
对对，去打工嘛，因为家里面欠了很多债，很难受，就觉得，当时就觉得自己还没有力量，就是看着父母要去受罪。
Now these memoirs don't come cheap. A short memoir costs 20,000 yuan, 4.5 months average disposable income. Longer ones cost 50,000 yuan, that's almost a year's average disposable income. For the price, clients get a digital copy and 10 printed copies.
有很多事情虽然钱很重要，真的是后面有很多就补充一句话，钱不是说什么都给你能换回来的，是因为我现在就感觉带给我的这一种心里面的被懂、被了解以后，给我的认可、坚持下来的认可以及力量，但不是说这些钱可以给的，对，起码是自己想分享，因为在内心来说，它是蛮丰富的。
Xiaojun helps clients like Chongqing tell their stories. He discovered this writing niche 7 years ago. At first, he did it part-time. In 2024, he quit his day job and started writing memoirs full-time. Each memoir takes 3 to 4 months to finish. Xiaojun's completed 6 memoirs in 7 years. He's earned 200,000 yuan, or almost $28,000 US. That's not as much as his previous job in communications, but he says the trade-off has been worth it.
我觉得，至少现在来看吧，在当前的这种大环境背景下，哪有什么稳定的工作，只有稳定的能力啊。那么，与其去追求一份所谓的稳定的工作，把安全感放在别人身上，比如说放在老板身上。 用那个来内耗自己，倒不如去选择一件自己认为做这个事非常有温度、有价值的事，然后呢又觉得它以后是有前景的。那我觉得，既然我遇到了，那为什么不去做呢？
He's not the only young Chinese who feels this way. In a MoneyMind survey, 83% of Chinese respondents said poor workplace culture and values would make them quit their job. This was the highest number among the 6 countries surveyed.
虽然说他可能现在这样一份全职工作跟我以前的工作比，他收入肯定是不如以前的，就至少现阶段来说。但是我更看重的是他未来的一个趋势跟前景。
But in an era where you can get AI to write anything, is Xiaojun afraid that AI will someday take over his job?
用 AI 能不能够替代人来写回忆录这个事儿，那我自己的答案是不能。就为什么呢？就是回忆录它是一种记录嘛，但是它是对忆主人生经历的一种选择跟整合，它是挖掘对方的潜意识里面的东西。
Xiaojun does make use of AI as a tool to help him streamline his work. For example, sorting interviews and restoring old photos. Going forward, Xiaojun has a big goal in mind: to complete 10,001 memoirs.
就代写回忆录是一件有温度跟有价值的事情。然后呢，我也给自己定了一个小目标，就是我说我要用余生去帮助10001名的中老年人朋友去记录他们的人生故事。然后为什么是10001名呢？就最后一个是留给我自己。
A noble profession, if you ask me. Now, for more of CNA's Money Mind episodes, do log on to cna.asia or our mobile app. ChinaJoy, a digital entertainment expo touted to be Asia's largest, has opened in Shanghai. The 4-day expo is primarily about gaming, but it also covers other forms of digital entertainment online, including animation, internet video, and esports. Artificial intelligence is a key focus this year, both for character animation and game creation. AI-enhanced gameplay is generating major buzz, and it's emerging this year among the dozen other tech topics that are discussed around the technology's legal and compliance issues. Now, observers say that while AI has revolutionized content creation, it's also created legal challenges. This year's event venue spans 18 soccer fields. More than 700 companies are represented, about the same as last year. But the number of foreign companies has dropped. It's down to some 240 from more than 300. Still, that didn't seem to diminish the enthusiasm of hordes of die-hard fans. According to organizers, super early bird tickets were sold out in 51 seconds. Last year's event attracted more than 360,000 visitors.
我觉得来这里可以买到一些我在其他地方买不到的东西。然后呢，主要还是游戏，我觉得是游戏的质量，然后是游戏的创新度，在吸引着人们往这边来。
想来看一下那个自己喜欢的那种相关的动漫 IP， 以及最新发布的像那种影之灵刃、什么明末这种新游戏的这种线下的这种试玩，然后来体验一下。
我上次来 CJ 的时候有很多那个新产品的展示。这次的话，我感觉更多是各种新游戏的这个体验试玩、体验展示。
Southeast Asia's modern coffee market is enjoying robust growth driven by rising disposable income and consumer preferences. CNA's Melissa Goh looks at some homegrown specialty coffee businesses with their own unique ASEAN blend.
ASEAN, with a population of almost 700 million, is among the fastest growing regions in the world. Its coffee industry is a multi-billion-dollar business, supported not just by its role in the global supply chain, but also by a booming domestic consumption. It's no surprise that international coffee chains are expanding in Southeast Asia. But local players are unfazed. One cafe owner in Vientiane is proudly brewing her own blend of specialty coffee, using only beans sourced from Bolivian Plateau in southern Laos.
We believe that the local farmers need our support, and in order for us to have 100% good Lao coffee, we need to work with them.
What is it that Laotian beans different from the others, and what's the potential for the industry?
I would say every bean is unique to its country, right? Because it depends on the soil, so where it's grown and how it's grown. So what makes Laos unique is, for sure, is the volcanic soil, where the majority of the coffee are grown, and most of the people are still harvested by hand. So that's what makes Lao coffee so special.
It's a business that she began with her husband 7 years ago. Lao coffee, she said, is hugely popular among the Thais.
I believe so much that Lao coffee has the potential to be in the market, in the ASEAN market. But I also believe that ASEAN should work together as a kind of ASEAN blend, like having from different countries together, blend into one that is called ASEAN.
Lao coffee has so much flavor, and she can't wait to introduce it to coffee lovers in the region through greater intra-ASEAN trade.
Thank you, Nini. So nice to see you. Yeah, all the best. Yeah, cup chai.
Nini is not the only one. More than 2,000 kilometers away, a Malaysian cafe owner is having the same idea, brewing its own unique ASEAN blend.
I got 50% of Arabica from Malaysia, 40% of Robusta from Indonesia, and 10% of Arabica from Vietnam. So we're using the traditional way to roast it to create a full body flavor.
Many of his customers enjoy the aromatic blend that is strong, sweet, and creamy.
I actually prefer our local coffee over like Starbucks, or even like Luckin Coffee is coming during Asia. If you give me a choice, take between these like big brands or like local coffee, I'd always drink local coffee.
Intense competition and rising costs are two main challenges he faces.
Increasing in living costs currently in Malaysia is quite bad, quite high. Everything is increasing because our currency is going down. Consumer behavior is changing. Free trade for ASEAN country, between ASEAN country. Yeah, I think this would help a lot for Malaysia SME.
He's looking to expand his business into neighboring Indonesia next year as ASEAN pledges to speed up economic integration.
As the region integrates, indeed, social media goes a long way in helping young entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia to tap the growing coffee culture in the region to promote the uniquely ASEAN coffee blends across the region and beyond. Melissa Goh, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Perfect way to end this Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime. CNA.Asia. Check us out also on Facebook and YouTube. Bye-bye.